Hi, so it's Harper Serene, and I did my project on the overprescription of psychiatric drugs in America and why it's a problem for my generation. And I basically highlighted some personal stories with psychiatric drugs. And then, first I started with Bradley, who's 21 and died from polypharmacy, which is prescribing too many psychiatric drugs at once. And then I kind of just give a little overview of what I'm going to talk about in the paper. And then I talk about the rise of psychiatric medicine and some statistics like how the month between 2016 and 2022, the monthly rate of antidepressant prescriptions rose by 66.3%. And then I kind of just say that that was already growing before COVID, so COVID can't be blamed for it. Then I also highlight the fact that less than one third of Americans who are taking an antidepressant have seen a therapist or health professional within the past year. And so then I just say that this leaves patients with questions because they only rely on a psychiatric medicine and they don't have any cognitive therapy for it as well. And then I highlight even more personal stories. We start off with Steve, who was misprescribed and then had negative side effects to it and then was misdiagnosed based off of this and how it affected his life. And then I go into Ruby Erlacher, where she had bipolar, but the medicines made her unable to do art, which she loved doing. So I thought that was interesting. And then I talk about Renee, who was prescribed a bunch of psychiatric drugs all at once as a teenager. And then I just say that these stories aren't uncommon. Like they're pretty common. People just don't talk about them. And then I go into how big pharma sells the myth of chemical imbalance because it sells more, but that theory has been disproven. And then I just talk about how, as of now, medicine's kind of seen as the only option because therapy is hard to get. It's expensive because it's not covered by insurance. Um, and then I just go into the negative effects. And then lastly, I say how we can solve this, and we can solve it by stepping away from big pharma and letting them decide how we prescribe and what we do. And then I just go into how it affects my generation, because we're the guinea pigs. These medicines haven't been tested, and they're testing them out on us. So my research project, so I just kept looking up different combinations of negative effects of psychiatric drugs, negative effects of psychiatric drug stories, um, overprescribing, and then therapy shortages. So I just used some keywords and then found reliable sources that worked in that. And then the writing process, I made an outline first so that I knew what order I wanted my paper to be in. And then I just kind of put in the outline which sources would best work with each part of my outline. And then I just started writing it, and I tried to use storytelling elements, which is why I started off with a story to make it not as boring. And I wish I had more time to research, maybe include more of the negative side effects. I go into why they happen and stories based on them, but I don't give a list necessarily of all the negative side effects. And I do think people should read this because a lot of people, especially teenagers in my generation, are jumping right to getting prescribed a medicine instead of therapy without necessarily knowing the full effects of them because doctors don't always tell you. And I do think I made it interesting by it not being too heavy on medical definitions and all that. It includes interesting stories and the causes behind it. So I think people would want to read it, and I think it would be an interesting read.